The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps.
But I think that, but I can't get past the core fact about Walz, which is he presided over, allowed the biggest city in the state to get burned down.
And seemed to not only allow it, but kind of
he liked it.
Support it, you know?
Well, yeah, did you see the video of his wife saying, I kept the windows open so I could smell the burning rubber from the riots?
I did not see that.
The wife whose hand he shook.
Oh my God. By the way, I mean, I know it's picking on a little thing, but who the hell shakes their wife's...
It really makes you stop and think when a man greets his wife of 30 years with a stiff, formal handshake on a public stage. For Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, that painfully awkward moment didn't just disappear online. Instead, it felt like it exposed something deeper. On the surface, he leans heavily into the Minnesota nice persona, presenting himself as calm, polite, safe, and almost overly gentle, like he avoids confrontation at all costs. But when voices like Greg Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson began questioning that image, a different version of him started to appear. Not as a strong, confident leader, but as someone quietly smiling while problems grow around him. That handshake didn't seem like a harmless mistake. It felt like a small but telling moment, revealing a strange distance between the image he performs and the real person underneath. In a world where politicians usually hug their spouses for the cameras, Walz's formal handshake came across as cold and accidental proof that the act sometimes slips.
Politico lingers on candidates' fingers and defend Walz's wide eyes as they claim beards are for bad guys. Tyler, speaking of beards, and I mean the one on your face, not the one that you hang out with.
Let me just say that Walz and every other governor who did anything like that is a monster, and I think on some level he will be punished for it. But no, I admire what you did enough that I hope I'd be man enough to do it myself. I took minor risks during COVID by pointing out things that seemed true to me, but I didn't do anything that heroic. I think it's absolutely essential. Clearly, we're moving toward an authoritarian state. I think we've already arrived. I think your life is a testament to that.
Wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough? That's like telling Joy Behar she's not eating enough Doritos. That's like Jasmine Crockett saying, I gotta black this up. That's like Bud Light saying, hey, you know what? We could use more Dylan Mulvaney.
That friendly mask didn't just slip in 2020. It seemed to completely fall apart when Minneapolis went up in flames during the riots. Governor Tim Walz was suddenly facing a real make-or-break moment, and by almost any measure, it turned into a painful failure. For days, the city burned. The 3rd Precinct police station was abandoned. Crowds surged through the streets, and whole blocks crumbled into ash while the footage looked unreal. Yet Walz's response felt strangely slow and distant, almost hands-off. Greg Gutfeld even suggested it went beyond incompetence, implying Walz wasn't just allowing the chaos, but almost approving of it, as if the destruction was somehow justified. That idea only grew darker when a video surfaced of Walz's wife, Gwen, allegedly saying she kept her windows open to smell the burning rubber from the riots. Whether it was a badly timed joke or something else, the moment stuck in people's minds. Two powerful figures safe at home, while fear and destruction tore through the state's largest city. And the impact didn't stop there, with Minneapolis reportedly losing nearly 40% of its police force afterward, as officers left a department where they felt attacked instead of supported. To critics, it wasn't just a riot, but the beginning of the collapse of public safety under a governor who seemed more interested in political approval than protecting the people right in front of him.
So Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Who is Tim Walz exactly?
It started sort of with picking up on just these little lies he would tell. He never was a command sergeant major, despite the fact him saying that he was. He never attained this rank in the military. Instead, he abandoned his troops and they were deployed to Iraq without him, and he ran for Congress. So I've always felt as a reporter, if someone lies about little things, they're lying about big things.
That's a principle that stands the test of time.
And Minnesota has become, the home of this defund the police movement. It was on the ballot. Minneapolis did not vote to defund the police, but I would say in every way, shape, or form, they defunded the police. You have the Minneapolis Police Department that's lost about 40% of their cops since George Floyd. But instead of being
Minneapolis lost 40% of its cops in 5 years?
Nearly half.
While Minneapolis was still smoldering, it felt like another kind of fire was being lit. This time under the state's economy during Governor Tim Walz's handling of the pandemic. A harsh new reality set in, and critics argued he wasn't acting like a steady leader at all, but more like what Greg Gutfeld described as a mob boss making examples out of ordinary people. Small businesses were ordered to shut down with a cold, forceful tone, and one story that stuck with many involved a grandmother who peacefully opened her small business and ended up facing jail time. Her crime was trying to survive, yet she was treated like a threat, while huge corporate stores stayed open without interruption. It felt, to critics, like the virus supposedly hid in family shops and churches, yet somehow avoided the biggest chains and liquor stores that were labeled essential. To them, this didn't look like science-based leadership, but leadership shaped by power in favoritism. Tucker Carlson described it as a kind of technocratic control, where citizens were not just asked to follow rules, but were told what to think, what to fear, and when they were allowed outside. In that view, it felt less like public health guidance and more like public control, with the government treating adults like children who needed permission just to live their lives, all while speaking with the confidence of someone who mistook damage to livelihoods for saving them.
So I'm the law-abiding grandma that was sentenced to 90 days in jail for opening my business during the shutdowns as a peaceful protest when Minnesota Governor Tim Walz unconstitutionally and illegally shut our businesses down. So my question is, if you were in my situation, would you have done the same thing, or what would you have done?
Well, I flatter myself by imagining I would have done the same thing, because I think what you did is honorable and necessary.
Dude, you're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us.
But the doubts about Tim Walz's leadership don't just begin with his time as governor. Critics argue they stretch all the way back to the foundations of his public image, to what they describe as a lie that helped shape his career. For years, Walz was introduced as a command sergeant major, one of the most respected enlisted ranks in the military, a title that signals toughness, discipline, and the kind of trust that isn't handed out lightly. It became central to his persona, painting him as a seasoned leader who understood service and sacrifice. The problem, critics claim, is that the story doesn't fully match the reality. Walz served 24 years in the National Guard, but they point to records and reports questioning whether he ever officially reached that rank. To them, this wasn't a small mix-up. It was shared as settled truth, and they call it a fabrication. The criticism goes further, arguing that Walz left his unit to run for Congress right before it deployed to Iraq, a move they say looked like ambition winning out over loyalty at a crucial moment. As Tucker Carlson framed it, this wasn't just resume inflation, but a glimpse into a deeper pattern. The warning behind the critique is straightforward. If someone is willing to stretch the truth about something as basic as their own service record, how much trust should people place in the bigger things they say? In that telling, the rank controversy wasn't an isolated detail, but a sign of a politician willing to borrow honor he didn't fully earn because it made for a powerful story.
5 years ago this summer, George Floyd, a convicted felon, OD'd on fentanyl outside a convenience store in Minneapolis, and the country changed forever. 5 years later, Tim Walz is still the governor. Keith Ellison is still the attorney general. The cops who were falsely convicted of murdering George Floyd are mostly still in prison. But what happened in Minneapolis itself? Well, it's been wrecked. And no one has said a word about it. But I just wonder about this story in particular. Did he have contact with Walz? Do we know that Walz ever, suppose Walz said, I met this guy ever?
Well, this is what's interesting. We know that he served on a board appointed by Walz. However, I'll say that...
what kind of board was it?
It was a workforce development board.
Critics argue that the fallout from Tim Walz's ideology-driven leadership hit children the hardest. While he and his administration placed equity at the center of education policy, they say Minnesota's classrooms quietly slid into crisis. Under his watch, reading and math scores reportedly dropped, and the focus appeared to drift away from academic excellence toward ideology, where how students felt seemed to matter more than what they actually learned. Greg Gutfeld mocked the situation by joking that under Walz, 2 + 2 equals whatever won't hurt anyone's feelings. A line meant to highlight what critics describe as a serious problem, that the education system became a testing ground for progressive social experiments, with students paying the price. One observer even described it as ideological conditioning served lukewarm with a side of mediocrity. In their view, this decline wasn't accidental, but the predictable outcome of policies designed to create equal results by lowering standards for everyone, sending the message that avoiding discomfort matters more than real achievement. And while his public policies sparked frustration, critics also point to a deeply personal decision they find unsettling, that Walz and his wife were reportedly married on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Of all the days in the year, they argue, choosing the date tied to the haunting image of a lone protester facing down a tank raises uncomfortable questions. Was it ignorance, dark humor, or something more troubling, like a misplaced admiration for state power? The story goes further, with claims that the couple then traveled to China for their honeymoon, which critics frame as an uncomfortable irony, celebrating a marriage in the very country associated with the event that marked their wedding date. To those who already distrust his judgment, the symbolism feels heavy, and they describe the decision as shockingly poor.
People misreading Tim's odd greeting. The man of the hour, Tim Walz, brings us our second video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it.
His wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this
in Tiananmen Square
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
This slow-motion train wreck of a governorship, as critics describe it, became the perfect target for a two-man wrecking crew who each attacked it in very different ways. Greg Gutfeld brought the comedy, playing the role of a sarcastic assassin firing off rapid punchlines to show how ridiculous he thought the whole thing looked. And he didn't just criticize Walz, he seemed to genuinely enjoy tearing his story apart. Gutfeld focused on Walz's awkward efforts to connect with voters, including the moment Walz called himself a huge disappointment as an old white guy, which Gutfeld joked was the first thing he'd ever gotten completely right. His comparisons hit hard too, like when he mocked Walz's woke posturing by comparing it to telling Joy Behar she isn't eating enough Doritos. Then, Tucker Carlson stepped in as the calm, methodical narrator of political decline, quietly dissecting Walz's record without ever needing to raise his voice. He didn't portray Walz as an evil mastermind, but instead as something more ordinary and, in his view, more dangerous, a hall monitor with a pension. Through that lens, Walz became the model of a soft authoritarian, a smiling bureaucrat who loyally follows a failing elite consensus while signing executive orders that, critics argue, make life harder for the very people he says he wants to protect.
One of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. That was it.
Beyond the social issues, critics argue that Tim Walz's leadership pushed Minnesota's economy right to the edge of a cliff. In their view, his administration became a textbook example of how to make a state feel hostile to growth, with taxes rising quickly, regulations piling up, and policies that seemed to punish innovation, sending businesses fleeing like they smelled smoke. They point especially to his green energy agenda as the clearest window into his leadership style. Lots of symbolism, not much stability. In their telling, he backed expensive and unreliable plans that strained the power grid faster than he would cave in a teachers' union meeting, talking endlessly about sustainability while governing in ways they describe as anything but. To these critics, it was just another example of chasing a progressive dream instead of addressing the real, everyday needs of Minnesotans, who were left with higher costs and a less dependable system. And when the cracks began to show, they say he simply shifted the blame elsewhere. By the end, this sharp critique of Walz is framed as more than a political attack, but as a case study in modern leadership failure. Gutfeld supplying the comedy club punches, Carlson delivering the courtroom-style teardown, and Walz, in their words, providing the material. In this view, he represents a new kind of leader who wraps incompetence in a friendly smile and sells harmful policies in the soft language of compassion and science. And when the noise finally fades, the argument goes, he won't be remembered as the steady captain who guided Minnesota through rough waters, but as the guy who showed up to his own roast with a kazoo and still got roasted for it.